All right. Well, I watched HQ earlier in the week because I was eager to see what you and Petey Prisco had to say at
We on
Dolphins.
Paramount Plus? I would have watched it. I don't have Paramount Plus. I want
No,
it, but I still don't have it.
you have it. You just don't know how to put in the password, but we'll help you with that. I told you that. And I'm like you. I'm a man of my word. But I was watching on CBS Sports HQ and CBS Sports Spotlight on the CBS Sports Network. You and Pete down there talking to some of the Dolphins players. I saw the interview with Jalen Ramsey. And my first thought about Jalen Ramsey seeing him is, number one, he's tall. He's taller than you. Number
We were
two,
about the same. He had spikes on.
uh-huh.
I know we're both taller than Pete.
Yes. And he was also very measured. Like he's very outspoken when he's on the football field, and you see him on the field jawing at wide receivers, and that's who he is, and that's what in part what makes him great. But he was very measured in his responses, and I found that interesting how players can be completely different on the field and off the field. But you talked to him. What were your overall takeaways at the mini camp? Because the conversation starts with Tua, and I heard Pete say on the telecast that Tua looked thicker. And that's certainly one of the concerns with Bryce Young. And I think if Tua can stay healthy, this team can certainly be a playoff team and perhaps make a deep playoff run.
Yeah, no, Tua looked, he is very thick through his lower body. Looked like he's added some very good weight. I thought we were there last training camp that his arm looked stronger. He looked more comfortable in the offense because it is his second year. So he's been through a season. He has a relationship with Mike McDaniel. You can see that out on the field. They're talking a lot. I know Miami's probably on the offense and defense is a whole nother discussion, but made some adjustments to what they do. But you can see just the level of confidence, knowing the system, seeing Tua get through his progressions, and the decision making, even though it was just a mini camp and in shorts, but just seemed crisper, quicker processing, and much more comfortable than we saw maybe when it was getting installed last year and him still trying to figure out. But there was no question, I think, before he started getting the concussions, he was having an MVP type year as far as from a numbers and production standpoint. So I think you should expect some big things from this Dolphins offense. Pete made a great point while we were down there, is that I think Mike McDaniel is going to grow not only as a head coach, but an offensive coordinator because he does call the plays as well. There was a situation, I think, was in Buffalo last year.
Oh, yeah.
That he threw the ball, I think, 3 times on 3rd and short, and they're going to have to be able to run the ball. And, if Mostert's back and healthy, Wilson, and then Achane, what we'll talk about in a little bit, plus the playmakers at the receiver position. But it's all going to come down to how they develop up front, because they did not make, out of all the moves they made, and I think they made some very significant moves, Chris Greer did this offseason, but the offensive line will be the biggest question going into training camp. Now, they brought in Isaiah Wynn. He was lined up at left guard the day I was down there, or the day we watched it. So he has not been worked at tackle. Armstead, I don't believe in his entire career has made it through a 16 or 17 game season. That's another concern of mine. Jackson, I did not see practice much.
Austin Jackson, the right tackle?
Yeah, Austin Jackson.
Yep.
Eichenberg was in playing center. So they've moved him around at different positions. And then biggest one was that Connor Williams is holding out right now, and he was not down in camp. And they just signed him last year from Dallas.
Right.
It was a 2-year contract, so he's entering the final year of his contract. So I'm sure that they're trying to work out something to potentially extend him, because he was having a pretty good year for him last year at center before he got banged up a little bit.
So, I mean, this isn't any grand proclamation, but you can have Jalen Waddle, you can have Tyreek Hill, you can have the running backs that we talked about, Tua Tagovailoa. If your offensive line is a problem, none of that other stuff matters, because it just doesn't work if you don't have an offensive line. So on a scale of 1 to 10, and we're sitting here on June 8th, what's your concern level with the offensive line in Miami?
Probably a 5 out of 10 right now.
All right.
But they have to stay healthy. That's the
Yeah.
number one thing. And then I think Mike McDaniel, from a play calling standpoint, when he came from San Francisco, a lot of their offense, again, they have a very good offensive line, but based on the running game. And I think when Mike McDaniel, his first time as a head coach, you get all these new shiny toys out there running around, that maybe he got away from that philosophy a little bit. And maybe he learned some things as a first time offensive coordinator
Yeah.
slash head coach, and understands that at certain points in the game, hopefully you're going to be able to run the ball. And if they can run the ball effectively next year, I think they're going to be very good. They were just looking at, they were like tied for 25th in rushing offense last year. They were fourth in passing offense. So if they can get that even up into the top half of the league, that's going to be a tremendous help. And it'll take some pressure off of Tua as well, and him getting pinged around in that pocket.
Yeah, and you talked about this when we were doing our pro day tour, like the things you didn't know as a GM first go round, which you were, I think, late 30s when you get your first stint as a general manager, to what you knew 20 years later when you're general manager. It was night and day. So even though we typically talk about Tua growing into the role in year 2, year 3, whatever, Mike McDaniel, yeah, he went to Yale. Yeah, he coached under Kyle Shanahan. Obviously still has a ton of room for growth. And we saw that last year in some of the mistakes he made. And he's a smart dude. He's a little quirky, but that doesn't mean he's not good at his job. And he certainly has an opportunity to grow into that.
And what will help him grow as well is getting Vic Fangio.
Yeah, good point.
Because Vic Fangio has been a head coach. He's been a longtime coordinator, maybe the best defensive coordinator in the league. And so having a Vic Fangio on your staff that has that type of experience, that is a great resource to lean on during the season. And as they're going through these OTAs, that's going to be a huge factor on Mike McDaniel growth as well.
So the Dolphins only had a handful of draft picks because they got docked a first round pick for tampering last with the Tom Brady and the Sean Payton stuff, I believe. But let me ask you about the rookies that were there. You mentioned Devon Achane, the running back out of Texas A&M, who's absolutely explosive. They also drafted Cam Smith, a cornerback out of South Carolina. And, the things that I had heard about Cam Smith was that good athlete, needs to be a better teammate. So I want to ask you first about Cam Smith. Did you get a chance to see him at all? And number one, and number two, what effect does the aforementioned Vic Fangio have on a guy who's a good athlete, but maybe needs to mature a little bit?
Yeah, two things. He was running with the second group out there. They were rotating a lot of the young guys in and out this time of year. There was no question when you watched his movement skills, you can see the athleticism. Vic Fangio's system is more of a zone type system, a cover 4, which means 4 across the board on the deep half. Vic does not want to give up big plays. And they'll do, but the one thing about this defense, and when we talked to Jalen Ramsey a little bit about it, it is a complicated defense that takes time. And I don't know, it just looked a few times watching him, there may have been some mental bust, but that's normal.
Yeah.
Especially this time of year, coming in and trying to learn a new system, and a system like Vic Fangio runs. But what makes Vic Fangio's system so unique is that the pre-snap and what they're shown and what the quarterback may think the coverage is, and then how they change post-snap as a totally different coverage. And that's why it's been so effective. But they're going to play probably, I imagine there'll be some 2-man and some things like that, but a lot of different types of zone coverage and combination coverages. And that takes time to learn. But last year under Boyer, they were a lot of blitzing and a lot of man coverage. So that's why they gave up some big plays. And I think they were ranked 27th in pass defense last year. But I understand they had a lot of injuries on the back end as well. And a lot of guys missed a lot of time. But I think they will start to eliminate some of the big plays that were given up last year. Granted, they stay healthy. And now that you went out and get a Jalen Ramsey to team up with Xavier Howard,
Mm.
that's going to be maybe, if not the best, one of the best quarterback or cornerback tandems in the league.
Right, and Noah Igbenogany still there, former first-round pick. He's fallen down the depth chart, but if he's able to refine himself. And the ironic thing about what you just said there, Rick, is that while rookies typically, especially long athletic rookies, typically are better in man coverage, that's what ends up giving up big plays. And that's to your point. Also, zone defense sounds easy. You just stand in the zone, but as you sort of noted there, it can become incredibly complicated. And when cornerbacks have to think, that's when they get beat because they're not able just to react and play football. So we'll see what that means for Cam Smith. A little easier path to the field, I would imagine, is Devon Achane, who is electric. And while he's undersized, he can run inside or out. It is funny that they just keep stockpiling running backs there. Achane's basically the same size as Mike McDaniel. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the picture of them walking on the field there. Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., who feel like the same player. Devon Achane, Salvon Ahmed still on the roster. Miles Gaskin's there. And I'll ask you about Achane first, and then I'll ask you about the interest perhaps in Dalvin Cook and how he might fit in such a crowded running back room.
Yeah, Achane, there is no question. You can see the explosiveness. You can see him cut on a dime. Again, the offensive and defensive linemen are pulling up, but you can see the movement skills, the speed, everything that you've seen on tape at Texas A&M when he came out. Caught the ball extremely well during the practice session I was at. So I can see him being utilized in a lot of different ways in this offense. The biggest thing is that they have to have the depth at the running back because Mostert's had some durability issues. Wilson has some durability issues. So I think Achane will have a big effect or be a factor in his rookie year down there. I'm excited to see when the pads come on and see all the things that we saw on tape, if that will translate. And from what I saw at practice, it looks like that it will.
So knowing what you just said, why would there be any interest in Dalvin Cook? Because if you have Achane and you have Wilson and you have Mostert, where does Dalvin Cook fit into that?
I just think and Chris Greer has done a great job collecting toys. And if you can end up with a Dalvin Cook down there, that's just going to be one more explosive playmaker on that offensive side of the ball. But, we talked about that, and it was great from the media standpoint to kind of, hey, what if you put Dalvin Cook in that offense too? And just think what that would be, which it would, because Dalvin Cook is still a very good football player and still a very explosive playmaker. But I think that I tried to, as I was sitting there watching practice, I just invested a draft pick in Achane. I want to make sure he gets on the field. So do I make a move to try to get a Dalvin Cook or not?
Right.
But to put him in the backfield with all the playmakers that they have, that would be a very, very exciting offense. And with the durability concerns on some of the other running backs, because they're all smaller running backs, that Dalvin Cook would be definitely a great addition, in my opinion, down in Miami if Minnesota moves on from him.